I've spent most of my adult life on the road. Some people travel to escape, others travel to find something. I travel because the world keeps surprising me at the exact moment I start believing I've seen everything. This story happened a few years ago, in eastern Turkey, on a night when I was completely convinced nothing interesting could possibly happen. I had taken the last evening train heading toward the city of Kars. I chose that route because I'd heard the landscapes were beautiful at sunrise, mountains stretching like folded sheets, quiet villages, and fields of snow even in late spring. But as soon as I boarded, I realized the carriage was almost empty. No tourists, no families, no chatter, just an older conductor, a young couple asleep, and a man in a dark coat sitting 3 rows behind me. The train pulled away from the station, and the windows filled with darkness. The rhythmic shaking started to put me to sleep. I closed my eyes for maybe 10 minutes, and then something strange happened. The carriage lights began flickering. Not violently, just enough to make you feel like you're drifting in and out of different worlds. When I looked around, I realized the man in the dark coat was staring at me. Not aggressively, not even curiously, just watching. I nodded politely. He didn't nod back. A few minutes later, the train slowed down. But there were no lights outside, no station, not even a village. Just empty fields. The conductor walked through the carriage with a flashlight and asked us to stay seated. "There's a problem on the tracks," he said. "We'll stop for a few minutes." Those few minutes turned into half an hour. Then 40 minutes. I don't know why, but something in that moment made me decide to get up and stretch my legs. I walked down the corridor until I reached the back door of the carriage. The cold air hit me immediately, the kind that feels clean, sharp, and ancient. The night sky above was absolutely clear. I stepped down onto the ground, carefully, just to look around. That's when I noticed the man in the dark coat standing a few meters away from me. He wasn't smoking, wasn't on his phone, he was just staring into the field, completely still, like he had been placed there by someone who forgot to animate him. I approached him slowly and said, "Everything all right?" He didn't look at me at first. Then he pointed toward the darkness and said, "Do you hear it?" I didn't hear anything except the wind. "What am I supposed to hear?" I asked. He turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see his profile. "Voices," he said. "But only when the train stops in this region." I didn't know whether he was joking, tired, or simply strange. But then, as I stood there in silence, I did hear something, faint, almost like singing. Not human singing, more like a melody carried by the wind. The man spoke again. "My father used to travel this route when he worked in the military. He told me that sometimes, on quiet nights, the wind carries sound from the mountains. It can travel miles without breaking." That explanation made sense. Mountains and valleys can play tricks on sound. But the feeling was different. It didn't feel distant. It felt close. Suddenly the conductor shouted from the train, "Gentlemen, back inside. We're departing." As I climbed back on board, I glanced behind me. The man in the dark coat wasn't there anymore. I stepped inside, thinking he must have walked ahead of me, but the carriage was empty. Only my seat, the young couple, and the conductor. I asked the conductor, "Where did the man in the dark coat go?" The conductor frowned. "What man?" I described him. The conductor shook his head slowly. "There are only 3 passengers on this train," he said. "You, and the couple who boarded in Ankara." I almost laughed, thinking he was messing with me. But the look on his face was sincere. I walked through the entire carriage, every seat, every row. Empty. The train started moving again, and the lights stabilized. The landscape outside shifted as the first hint of blue appeared on the horizon. I sat down, confused, replaying the moment in my head. I wasn't tired enough to hallucinate. And I'm not the type to let imagination run wild. When we arrived in Kars at sunrise, I stepped off the train with the odd feeling that I'd dreamt everything. But as I walked away from the platform, I heard something, very faint, carried by the same cold wind sweeping across the tracks. That same melody. I turned around instinctively, and in the window of the last carriage, reflected in the glass, was the silhouette of a man in a dark coat. I blinked. The reflection vanished. To this day, I can't explain what happened. Maybe there really was someone there. Maybe he slipped out without anyone noticing. Or maybe some stories happen simply to remind us that the world is still far stranger than we want it to be. And that's exactly why I keep traveling. Because the moment you think your life has become predictable, the night train to Kars proves you wrong.